Hey, Gang Road here. Welcome on back to the Cade. We are back in business after our week-long holiday. And since we decided to take some time off, we figured since we're back and open for business, we'll bring the holiday to you as we go back to 1986/87. And we're going to play a game that really kind of snuck under the radar on the old Nintendo Entertainment System, but in a lot of ways became a bit of a cult hit. It's called Adventure Island. It was made by Hudson Soft. It came out in Japan in 1986, but it didn't make it to North America until 1988. And as you can see, it's very much a game of the time where it's a 2D side-scrolling platform game in the vein of Super Mario Brothers. But unlike Mario Brothers, this has an entirely different character and an entirely different aesthetic to it, where you play in the American version a man known as Master Higgins. In the UK version, he was Master Wiggins, and in the Japanese version, his name was Takahashi Meijin. And what you're having to do is you've come to Adventure Island to save Princess Tina, who is a character I have never met in all the years I've played this game, from an evil witch doctor who has kidnapped her. Now, is this a game you could probably make today? With that subject matter? You'd have to be very, very careful about it. But one of the things about this game that made it as popular as it was back in the day was how it's presented graphically, because it's very, very colorful. It's not super hard to play. Your B button is your jump, your A button, or excuse me, your A button is jump, your B button is being able to throw your weapons, and then if you need to, you can also do speed up and do a extra fast burst to help you jump. Now your life bar is these vertical slashes you see at the top of the screen. They top off at 16 of them, and they serve as both your life and as a timer. Oh, I don't want the skateboard. Yeah, part of this game is that you get all sorts of goodies to play around with, including, whoa, that got close, a skateboard. Now, like most games at the time, if Master Higgins here gets hit by an enemy once, much like Mario did when he wasn't in Super Mario form, that was the end of your life. And as you see in the upper left-hand corner, where you see the visage of Mr. Higgins there is 2, which means I only have 2 lives to navigate through all 32 levels of this game. Now, like Mario, it is separated out in 8 worlds, 4 zones each world. Now, one of the things that helps you prolong your ability to stay alive is picking up all this fruit and all this food that you see popping out of the air. And now we are invincible. But if that timer runs out... Ooh! I missed the jump. I should have done a sprint there. But if that timer runs out, then you die. Now, most enemies, when you have the stone hammers, only take 1 shot to be taken out with. So now we made it to zone 4 here. Nope. See, and that's the thing you got to be careful about with the sprint, is that if you don't time it right and you don't jump right, you can go take yourself right off the cliff. So it is a matter of precision and it is a matter of timing. Whoa, that one fell right out. But we made it through stage 2 and now we're on to stage 3. Now, what really sucks is that this game does not have continues. Because again, being 1986, 7, 8, they never really thought about incorporating things like continues in these games, which they should have. But you'll have to remember that a lot of these games were still ported over based on arcade games. So to them, getting a continue was almost unheard of. It was almost a crime because you were depriving the cabinet you were playing on from getting well-earned quarters. So we'll see how far we can get through this first world again. But unfortunately, we have to start all the way back at the beginning. Now, we are doing this as a one-day playthrough, and people will sit there and obviously ask me, well, if you only get 3 guys and you got to get all the way through it on 3 guys, how is this a one-day playthrough? The answer is, in very much the vernacular of circa 2024, get good. And it's funny because we sit there and tend to think that that only applies to games, modern games like Dark Souls and God of War and Call of Duty and stuff like that. No, that that moniker has carried over the entirety that video games have been around. The question is, are you going to be willing to put in the time and energy needed to get good enough to get through all 32 of these levels? And that cobra spat at me. I wasn't expecting him to spit at me. Now, if you run over rocks, they will chip away at your health a little bit. I would love to know what's in that egg back there, but I don't have time to go back and grab it. Now, as far as ratings go, this game received a 62% aggregate score in Game Rankings. And back in the day, there were only 2 reviews of note that I was able to find. Allgame gave it a 3 out of 5, and GameSpot gave it a 6.5 out of 10. Ooh. Whoa. Now, like the original Mario, you can't go backwards. Once you progress far enough that the screen is no longer back where you were, you can leave yourself stuck in a very precarious position. Okay, take out the big man, and we're at stage 3, or part 3. And we've just made it back to part 4. So we're in good shape here. We have to remember that this one we jump on is going to fall. Now, in their review, GameSpot called Adventure Island a fast-paced, challenging platformer, and Games Radar Plus ranked it 23rd in their list of the best NES games ever made. Staff praised it for the fact that the challenge comes from quality level design and not low quality. It's widely regarded as one of the most difficult NES games. And I'm inclined to agree. But, like most platform games, if you can start to get the pattern recognition down, then you're in good shape. Ooh, except we died. But the good news is that we are still here around, level 3, or part 3. I'm just going to avoid as many eggs as I can. Oh boy. Jump the boulder. Don't want a skateboard to jump that. But what I need are hammers. And we made it through. So we didn't get the pot. But now we're into round 4. Alright, I'm not going to dawdle with the spiders. Ah! And that's the frustrating thing, is that I got hit by that snake. And now we have to start all over again back at Area 1-1. Now, in a lot of ways, I know there's a lot of you guys watching this going, man, you'd have to be an absolute masochist to play a game like this. And I guess in some ways you do, but think about it in terms of the challenge it poses. If you could manage to, it was like when we played Alex Kidd, which was another Hudson game. Alex Kidd in Miracle World. If you could manage to get through all of that game with just 3 lives, that was very much considered the achievement of the day back in the mid to late 80s. And in a lot of ways, it's why people of my generation look at what gamers of this era consider as difficult. And we almost scoff at it. Oh, she flew away just as I ran into that snail. And like I said, we scoff at it only because the consoles that we played on 30, 40 years ago, the standard of difficulty was like this more than it was games that you could just coast through. So, you know, it came with it a genuine sense of accomplishment. If you could sit there and tell your buddies at school, hey, while you were spending all weekend mucking around with a game like, well, I don't know, Castlevania 2 or Mario, or even Super Mario, which in some ways flattered you by all the ways you can get multiple lives and you could get ways to continue getting through the game. A game like this was so merciless that depending on who your friends are and how in-depth you were as gamers, how really far into the weeds you got, you could genuinely sit there and act like, you know, you were top dog because you managed to beat a game like this. I'm not saying we're right, I'm saying we were kids, and that's the sort of silly stuff kids do, or did back in the day. In order to prove their mettle as video game players. Well, I made it through that one a lot quicker. But that's the other thing, is that the more familiar with the game and the environment that you're playing it in, your brain does start to kick in a bit and go, oh, okay, now I know what we're dealing with here. He says as he jumps right into a bat. Because he's trying to avoid the skateboard. Whew, almost burnt my biscuits on that. Get out of the way of the boulders. Grab the milk jug. And whole butt. Ah! It lit me on fire. And down we went. Alright, let's try this one more time. This game proved to be so popular in Japan that in 1987 it actually inspired an anime called Honeybee in Toy-Com Land. It's an anime I've never seen, and I've watched a lot of anime in my time. But I have to admit that this sort of game, or this sort of story, wasn't really up my street at the time because it didn't have any giant robots in it. And I was nothing if not a massive giant robot anime fan. And I still am in a lot of ways. And I make no bones about it, nor should I. I'm an almost 50-year-old man. I likes what I likes. And as I told a friend of mine the other day as we were talking about food, nothing tastes better than nostalgia. Nothing feels better than nostalgia. Nothing feels better than harkening back to when you were a kid and being able to enjoy something that you probably in some ways took for granted a bit. And not intentionally, but you know, it's as kids, it's what you do. You don't necessarily develop the capacity to appreciate things in the moment until you get older. Alright, so we cruise through that. But yeah, this anime came out, it was produced by TMS Entertainment and aired in Japan in October 86 to September 87. Lasted 51 episodes and a theatrical film. Alright. I have to admit, at this point now, these levels especially feel like old hat. The difficult thing will be is if I can make it to World 2, you have to repeat the process all over again, but you only have the 2 lives that you currently have to try and negotiate your way through those as well. Oh, and I just got clipped by that octopi. Come on. All right. Dig out the pig. Something I haven't mentioned, and you would think with how prevalent it is that the music in this game actually isn't that bad either. It's there, but it's not so annoying that it, or at least as far as I'm playing it, detracts from the overall presentation of the game. Now, obviously, your perspective may vary on that. There we go. Now, they did do 2 sequels of this game for the NES, both titled Adventure Island 2 and 3. They also released a 4th game for the Famicom in Japan. That one never made it over to the US. When the Super NES came out, there was, of course, a version called Super Adventure Island. All right. Now we're back in the ice zone. Almost home. Whoo! Oh, and I got right there, and I was so close, and I died. Sometimes you just really got to be on top of it. I said we don't have any hammers now, so that's it. And we're at 25 minutes, so I mean, that's as good a place as any to call it. But that, everybody, is Adventure Island from 1987/88 for the Nintendo Entertainment System. First things first, is this a good game? For its time, again, it was part and parcel with what was really the mainstay of a lot of consoles in the late 80s. It was all about platform games. Again, you have to remember that everything, if it wasn't a direct import from an arcade, it was somebody trying to create a derivative version or try to improve on a formula that had already been, in a lot of ways, perfected. This came out in the US 3 years, 2 years thereabouts, after the original Super Mario Brothers came out. So, of course, everybody back then was going to try and find a way to capitalize on that formula that Nintendo so brilliantly captured with Mario and Luigi in the original Super Mario Brothers game. That Hudson Soft came up with something that was just different enough to make it interesting, but also cranked the difficulty up enough that if you thought that Super Mario Brothers was in some ways too easy, or other platform games at the time like Metroid or even Castlevania or Kid Icarus, games like that, weren't quite your thing, then this was a good alternative that people really got into. I don't know overall how many copies it sold. Again, back in the 80s, tracking how many units of each game a company sold wasn't as easy to come by as it is nowadays, where everything is so metricized to make sure that everything is tracked down to the decimal point. And as we're seeing, obviously, with the impact that that's having, was it Xbox and Microsoft just announced they shut down 2 more studios last week because of poor game sales. You know, the landscape is rife with companies that, you know, if this was 35 years ago, they'd have the ability to create games like this and probably wouldn't have as much riding on the success or their long-term profitability or even longevity as a company as it was back then with Hudson Soft. Again, Hudson Soft was still around for another almost 15 years after this game came out. And even though this game is very, very challenging and it doesn't have much in the way of diversity as far as the gameplay goes, it was popular enough that it has been ported onto pretty much every modern console in one fashion or another ever since it came out in 87. So, is it a game they can make today? Sure. I mean, this would be a game that I would see very much as an indie game. Like a lot of games nowadays, that really seems to be the way the tide is shifting towards smaller independent studios that can come up with games like this, because Steam or, you know, PlayStation or for however long Microsoft is going to continue the Xbox, they need to have those independent titles that people will glom onto as a reason to buy the time until the next big AAA game comes along. So if they did it nowadays, I would imagine, you know, you would have things like they would probably overhaul the mechanics, at least as far as being able to make running and jumping more consistent. They would definitely incorporate continues into the game. I would only assume that they would have that. And because it wouldn't be entirely based off of how many lives you have, I would think, or they may even change the life mechanic, although I do think that the life mechanic in this game is actually fairly novel. having it where it acts as both the timer and your ability to stay alive, and that you're able to extend it by picking up fruit or milk or whatever items you grab along the way, that makes it interesting because it does give you a bit more incentive to really focus on getting to the end as soon as you possibly can. But is that something a modern gamer would accept? I don't know. I mean, I'm not a game designer. I'm just a player. So, if you've had experience with this game, let me know in the comments. I'd be interested to see what your thoughts on it are. What's your history with the game? If you have never tried it and you want to give it a try, I'm playing it on the Mesen emulator, M-E-S-E-N. It's a free emulator. Not hard to find. This game, especially, there's so many variations of it that you can find on the Internet Archive now pretty easily. So, but be forewarned, you are going to be in for a big challenge. But again, it is a game you can technically beat in a day, but it's not going to make it easy for you. So, that is our one-day playthrough for this Monday. It's glad to be back. If you've been enjoying the content, best way to show it, hit the like button, subscribe if you're new, ring the bell, be notified of new episodes. We are getting, again, as I said before we went on our hiatus, we are getting ready to start recording our next playthrough. That's going to start getting recorded on Tuesday and Wednesday this week. We are going to have a WTF Wednesday this week as well. And then we will be back with Sports Saturday and Sucker Punch Sunday this weekend as normal. Be sure to follow us on social media through Instagram and Threads at Ron's Retrocade to help spread the word about us as we continue to build our subscriber base, make this channel bigger and better for everybody. And if there's a game you would like to see us feature from the Nintendo Entertainment System, the Super Nintendo, Sega Master System, Sega Genesis or Mega Drive, SNK Neo-Geo, Nintendo 64, Sega Saturn, Sega Dreamcast, PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2, leave it in the comments below or drop me a line on social media. It can be any game from those consoles that you want. My name is Ronan. It is great to be back and have the Retrocade open again. We will talk to you on Wednesday for another episode of WTF Wednesday. Bye.